District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program. Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. Welcome back to the program, Stephen Gutowski, founder and editor of The Reload. Stephen is a repeat guest, and he's one of my longtime friends. We have crossed paths and worked in similar circles for 14 years. I can't believe that. And he's one of those trustworthy voices on all things gun politics, and especially keeping his eye in Virginia. Stephen, welcome back to the program. I'm so thrilled to have you because I had talked to Cam Edwards about this a few months ago, and everyone in Virginia, all of us are Virginia residents who are listening for the most part, and we have non-Virginia residents listening who are concerned. You and I both own guns. We have concealed carry permits where we could be affected by this. And I think new gun owners interested in protecting themselves in the Commonwealth will be definitely affected by this. And I think even you were mentioning even existing gun owners will be affected by some of the changes. But there are a couple bills that have made Governor Spanberger's desk. I think you said 8. There are several of critical importance that you're going to talk about. But update my listeners as to what has made it to Spanberger's desk, because there were dozens of bills. Not every bill passed. Some were severely changed, but there were a couple, especially the so-called assault weapons ban. And then you talked about, before we went online, an 18 to 20-year-old handgun law. So I want you to break down, I would say, the most important pieces of legislation. What is happening? She now is sending back amendments to the General Assembly. That's just the procedural kind of thing that happened. So what is occurring, and what is likely to either pass or get signed into law by Governor Spanberger?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, by the way. It's good to be back. It's been a little while, and I guess we're getting a little old now. I've been doing this for quite a bit now. But yes, there's a lot going on in Virginia around gun policy right now, quite a lot. The state is really moving from what had been, if you go back 6-7 years before the last time Democrats had control of the state house and the governorship, it was a pretty the laws were not nearly as restrictive back then. It was more akin to a lot of other southern states, and so now, 5 years on from the first round of gun restrictions that were passed pre-Youngkin. And now this new batch of, really, it's more than a dozen new gun laws that are going to likely go into effect here. 8 have been sent back by the governor. She signed a number of other bills already into law after the legislature passed them. There's 8 that she's sending back with recommendations for what she would like to see changed in these laws. But the bottom line overall is it's going to be a pretty substantial change to Virginia gun policy, and it's going to put it more in the state more in the realm of Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, DC, Maryland, right? These deeper blue states or areas that have some of the strictest laws in the country. So Virginia is moving much further toward that type of environment than it had been 5, 6, 7 years ago. So there's been a huge shift on that front after a sustained effort by the gun control groups to put a lot of money into the elections in Virginia to back their candidates to accomplish exactly this. So that's sort of your big picture. You're going to have not only universal background checks and red flag laws, and including an expanded red flag law now, where more people can initiate the process, and you're also going to have what's usually called an assault weapons ban. In most other states, they call it an assault firearms ban. In Virginia, it's just a terminology difference that doesn't mean much. The actual policy itself is very similar to a number of other bans across the country. And so you're going to end up with a very strict set of gun policies here. But we're not fully through the process yet, as you mentioned, right? There's this way that the governor can impact legislation here in Virginia where she can send back laws that have passed the legislature with changes that she wants to see. And then the Virginia legislature will go back into session, usually for a single day. And this is going to be on April 22nd, so it's next week. And they're going to basically do an up or down vote on the changes she's suggested. So we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. She's a brand new governor with a new House, at least. The Senate hasn't changed. Their election is next year. But so we don't know exactly how they work together and how much. They're obviously the same party. So you would expect much of what the governor wants, she'll probably get from her colleagues in the state House. But we don't know for sure. I mean, she might have pissed off some of them by some of the things she's done. I think there were like 1,000 bills or something. I don't know.
It was a lot this last
cycle. There were a lot of bills that went through, and she vetoed some of them, even though obviously her party passed some of these bills. And so I don't know. It's hard to say exactly how they feel. I have, by the way, reached out to both the governor and about half a dozen of the senators who are in the most competitive districts for some comment on some of the changes that she's made. Nobody's talking. Nobody's replied to those requests for comment. So, we just don't know exactly what the legislature is going to do. But the biggest change they've made is related to the assault firearms ban.
Please expand. Yes.
Yeah. So there's actually two bills that one bans the sale, manufacture, transfer of assault firearms, right? And the other one bans the carry of assault firearms. And the change that the governor has made has actually significantly expanded the definition of what an assault firearm is. And this matters primarily, it seems. Now, the language she used, the way she did this, is pretty confusing, to be fair. So we don't know it's hard to know the exact extent of what this change would do because of the way this bill is now written with the governor's recommendation in it. This is one of the things I try to get clarity on from the governor, and she hasn't offered any. But essentially what she did is change the first definition in the law. So the law has the definitions of assault firearm that you would see in a lot of other states like Maryland and Illinois and Massachusetts. And essentially it's a semi-automatic rifle that has one or more feature. And there's a number of like ergonomic and cosmetic features, pistol grip, telescoping stock, things of that nature, right? That it can accept a detachable magazine, it's center fire, and it's semi-automatic. Pistols, it's two features. These are, pretty standard definitions that you'll see in a lot of these types of bans. And then it also has a definition where, because this law also implements a magazine restriction that says you can't have magazines, you can't buy new magazines at least, that hold more than 15 rounds, they also have a definition that's common to these laws across the country that says, well, a semi-automatic rifle or pistol that has a fixed magazine that holds more than 15 rounds is also an assault firearm. What the governor has done here is changed that part of the definition and removed the word fixed. So now the first definition for assault firearm just says a semi-automatic rifle or semi-automatic pistol with the magazine capacity of more than 15 rounds. And so you can see that kind of doesn't make total sense, because the guns themselves, unless they have a fixed magazine, right, they don't have a magazine capacity inherently if they accept detachable magazines. It seems, and talk to Phil Van Cleve from the Virginia Citizens Defense League, and they think the most likely reading of this is basically anytime you insert a magazine that has the capacity to hold more than 15 rounds, the gun becomes an assault. It's sort of like Schrodinger's assault firearm. Mm-hmm. It's not an assault firearm if it doesn't have the magazine in it, or if it has a magazine that holds 15 or less rounds. And then the moment you put one of those magazines in, then it becomes an assault firearm. That's how I would read it too. But that is the thing that I've tried to get clarity on, because some people will say, well, this could mean any gun that's capable of accepting more than 15 round magazine. would be included in the definition. And that would be basically every semi-automatic gun that accepts a magazine, because you can make a magazine is just a box with a spring in it. You can make, and people do make, all sorts of size magazines that'll fit into pretty much every gun out there. There's also, Van Cleve brought up the idea, well, what if you have the gun and it has 15-round magazine in it, but you're also carrying a 17-round magazine on your person? Is that 17-round magazine with the gun? It's not clear, right? And this is where it matters the most, because if it's the sort of looser definition that we discussed here, it really only matters in the context of carry, because there's a companion bill that also bans the carry of assault firearms, and it uses the definition from the sales ban. And so if your gun becomes an assault firearm anytime you put a 15-round magazine in it, even if you can, even if the magazines themselves are not illegal to possess, right? They're grandfathered in under these proposals, the ones you already own. Mm-hmm. You couldn't carry them if that's the proper reading. As soon as you put the magazine in your gun, it becomes an assault firearm, and assault firearms are banned for carry basically everywhere under this law. So that seems to be the intention. It's not entirely clear. Like I said, she hasn't given any. She's put out a statement. The statement just said that that her changes offer clarity for law enforcement on what an assault firearm is, although it sure seems to do the exact opposite of that. But and then also she talked about another change she made. She's made some small moderations to a couple of these gun bills, and then she's made some changes like this one that actually make the bill much stricter. But one of the things she also changed in the assault firearm ban was she took pistol grips off as a feature for specifically semi-automatic shotguns, claiming that was has to do with hunting. So that was the other change she offered for this particular bill. And that was the only thing she talked about in her statement when she announced the recommendation she was going to make. So we just don't know for sure exactly what this language is supposed to be. I mean, I think that's part of the drafting. Like all she did was take that word fixed out. And the problem you have now is, what exactly does it mean for a gun that doesn't have a magazine to have a magazine capacity of more than 15 rounds? It probably means that when you put a magazine in there that has more than 15 rounds, it becomes an assault firearm. But that was the biggest, most substantial change she's made.
Have you seen any similar crafting of legislation like this, a so-called assault weapons ban done like this? Because I don't think I've ever heard another state do this, because it's pretty cunning. Like, I will give them credit. Like it doesn't sound like a confiscatory move, but it seems like a way to do a wide sweeping prohibition under the guise of an assault weapons ban. I will say it's clever from the outside if you're not following this and don't know nomenclature. But it seems like a very clever way for her to achieve her means.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly, if the interpretation here is correct, it's basically a way of keeping people from carrying the magazines they already own that hold more than 15 rounds. Like, if your goal is, we think these magazines are bad and people shouldn't be able to have them, and they make mass shootings worse, which is often the argument that you'll hear from gun control activists who want magazine restrictions. They on the one hand, some states have gone further than this, right? Some states, New Jersey, California, have basically made it, they passed it's always a difficult word to say, right? Confiscatory legislation. They've passed laws that make it so you can't possess the magazines that, even if you already had them before the law passed, that hold more than whatever their new limit is, right? New Jersey did that. California did that. Now that's been the subject of a lot of legal battles for the last decade or more, and those states haven't gone through with trying to collect those banned magazines either. And no one has New Jersey, literally nobody turned in a magazine after that ban passed. But they also didn't try to go door to door or anything like that. It is my only point here. Like, they passed this law that has a confiscation effect, but they didn't actually go around trying to strictly enforce it. So there are states that have done even further than this. I believe Illinois has done something similar where they're like, all right, we're putting in a magazine capacity and we're going to write the law in a way that you can keep the magazines and maybe you can use them in your home or at the range, but you can't carry them in public. And that's basically seems to be the point of what they're doing here.
Deliberate intention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that appears to be. She didn't announce that as the intention, certainly. And they won't answer questions about the intentions, but,
right.
Reading the laws, that would be the most obvious effect of it, at least. If not the more extreme effects that we talked about earlier. So, certainly it's definitely a roundabout way of getting to this conclusion if the legislature goes along with it, right? Obviously, last time, 2020, the reason we didn't have an assault weapons ban back then is that the Democratic senators got cold feet on that particular bill. They were okay with red flag laws and universal background checks, but they did not want to go all the way to an assault weapons ban. Now, politics in the state have changed. Certainly politics in the Democratic Party have changed here since then. Like Craig Deeds, for instance, senator who had run for governor at one point and is considered, he's from a more rural or ex-urban area of the state. He was one of the people who voted against the assault weapons ban the first time around in 2020. He's one of the ones who co-sponsored it this time. So, whether or not the legislature is going to want to go beyond what they already agreed to, I don't know. I will say that, some of these changes the governor has made or recommended seem a bit like they might trip up the legislature. Because one of the things, she did recommend changes to the assault firearms carry ban, which removed exemptions for law enforcement, for retired and off-duty law enforcement, which is not something you usually see Democrats doing. The Democrats traditionally are less, they're less persuaded by gun rights advocates, but they tend to be more open to what police groups have to say. And that's why you often see a lot of police carve-outs in these kinds of gun laws. And so it's interesting for the governor to go in to that assault firearms carry ban and remove exemptions for law enforcement, who tend to have a pretty powerful voice in the legislature, in most legislatures, in most states. And so that might trip up this whole effort as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, one thing to emphasize here is the legislature can't pick and choose between these reforms, right? Like they can either say yes or no to the governor. They can't modify their bill to sort of meet in the middle with her. They can just say yes or no. And the thing with the assault firearms carry bill is she modified that has its own, as it's written from the legislature, it had its own definition of assault firearms that included that fixed magazine language. And so she changed that to match what she's trying to do in the sales ban. And then she also removed those exemptions for law enforcement, retired and off-duty law enforcement. And so if the legislature is put off enough by that removal of those exceptions, it also means that definition isn't going to change to match the sales ban. And so that would undo all of this, essentially, the effect that we're talking about here, where you wouldn't be able to carry the magazines you already own. And by the way, this applies to everybody, right? Even though the law only bans the future sale of assault firearms and especially the magazines that hold more than 15 rounds, if you already own them, it wouldn't be a crime. You can keep them. But the problem is, even if you have, say, a concealed carry license to carry your gun and you legally own that 15-round magazine, under this language from the governor, you wouldn't be able to carry that. You'd be committing a crime if you carried that magazine. And so even though something you're doing right now today with guns you already own legally would be fine under these changes, if the legislature accepts them, come July, which is not long from now, it would be a crime for you to do the same thing you're doing today illegally.
Mm-hmm. I think that's intentional because they're trying to find maybe some legal protections in case some challenges. Everyone we've talked to, your sources, Cam Edwards talked about this recently. A lot of people are waiting for a Supreme Court case to decide, kind of these outstanding questions about carry, so-called assault firearms language, and the like. So, Stephen, with the last few minutes I have with you, what else are you guys covering? Because I will link to your reporting and make sure everyone sees that as it relates to the Spanberger efforts. But what else have you been focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, what you just talked about is something that we did an analysis piece on for Reload members just recently, talking about how difficult it actually will be to undo an assault firearms ban if it does make it into law here. And, I will say as well, if the legislature rejects the governor's recommendations, it doesn't mean the bill is dead necessarily. It'll just go back to her desk, the same language it showed up with in the first place. And then she'll have to decide if she actually wants to follow through on vetoing it, or if she's okay with either signing it or allowing it to be to become law by not doing anything. That's another option she has. And so even if the legislature rejects the language, this bill could still become law in its initial form, the assault firearms ban, which is still a extremely significant policy change, right? It's still going to have a major impact on anyone who wants to buy in the future magazines that hold 15 or more rounds, or AR-15s or AK-47s, or really lots and lots and lots of guns will be affected by this. So just to be clear, and so we did a whole analysis piece that looked at why if that happens, if it does go through based on the makeup of the politics in Virginia, this election schedule, the fact that Democrats had really a kind of blowout win in the last election in the House, you might have some chance of getting the Senate back, because that's only a 2-vote majority for Democrats at this point in the elections next year. But even, it probably takes several years for a political movement based on how the parties operate today, right? They're pretty polarized on this issue. So you kind of, if you want this policy rolled back, you probably need Republicans to become the dominant party, which is a long road for that to happen in real life. And then the legal challenges are also hard. Even though the Department of Justice actually has already threatened to sue over this law, and that's likely to happen. They're already suing Washington, D.C. over their similar ban. It's a hard path, although we do identify sort of like a Dr. Strange one way through, that there is a realistic avenue where this law could be blocked and then eventually overturned and it never goes into effect. It's an unlikely scenario, but it's possible. And so we talked at length about that in a recent analysis piece looking at the situation here in Virginia. And then, of course, we focus quite a lot on national politics too. And, the DOJ is a great example, sort of some of the schizophrenia almost on gun policy we've seen out of the DOJ. And, we've covered that extensively. And then we have just pretty much everything you could think of when it comes to gun policy in America. We try to stay on top of for our readers and give, a good breakdown every week of what's happened and try to keep those macro stories in focus for everybody and keep everybody up to date on what's going on with guns in America.
I get the publication newsletter every week. I need to still subscribe many years later, but it's a great subscription. Stephen does excellent, top-notch reporting, and we're grateful to have him to break down what is happening in Virginia. Stephen, thank you so much, and keep me posted. And if we can do some updates, I'll have you back on.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.